We all need gis, rash guards, and a bunch of gear to train jiu-jitsu. Here at RŌL Academy, we've been using Fuji Sports for a very, very long time, but more importantly, they've been sponsoring the RŌL Radio podcast for over a year at this point. Gary?
Yeah, I'm checking out the website right now. Anything you could possibly need, but the new stuff, this American Grappler stuff, is amazing. It's so slick looking. Rash guard shorts, really cool. Giant eagle on it. It is nice. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, they've got the Be a Menace Happy No-Gi lineup. So as you're getting choked out, you're looking up at the nice smiley face emoji. Anything you could possibly need, you can find at fujisports.com.
Let's talk RŌL TV. There's so much content on there. It's ridiculous at this point. But I think what is even more intriguing, as time went on during the project, we've been recording most of the events that were taking place here at RŌL Academy. At this point, I mean, we have guys like Chris Howder, Armin Fati, Rafael Lovato Sr., and Pete the Greek. I mean, there are so many different events that we've kind of recorded it. Don't you think that's amazing? I mean, points of reflection and kind of going back for all the students to see what really happened and refresh their memory.
Yeah, I think it's great, you know, being able to go back and look at all these high-level practitioners, Octavio Cudo, like one of the names you didn't mention. And I mean, just these guys that have been doing this for so long come in, teach these amazing seminars and workshops, and it's all recorded and there for you to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you want to get additional savings on all this, type in code RŌL Radio at the coupon and get additional 30% off of your membership.
Nice. Go to rolacademy.tv. What's up, everyone, and welcome back. If you haven't already, please remember to hit the like, share, subscribe, download, listen, and whatever other button there is, and leave us a review wherever you do listen. And that ensures that we can continue bringing you the great guests and amazing content that you have come to expect. Today's guest went from a town so small that it didn't even have a stoplight all the way to the UFC. On this episode, Kyle Watson shares his martial arts journey, one that started in college at barroom MMA fights, through The Ultimate Fighter and the UFC, and now is a successful coach, instructor, and academy owner. Here is the RŌL Radio with third-degree BJJ black belt, Pan American champion, semi-finalist of TUF Season 12, Total Fight Challenge lightweight champion, Kage One Lightweight Champion, and head instructor and owner of Watson Martial Arts, Kyle Watson.
Welcome to RŌL Radio.
I'm keeping that in. Wow.
That was terrible.
Yeah,
Mike.
that was the worst.
I have one job to clap, and
That was the worst clap you've ever done.
I know you're going to keep that in there.
It's 100%.
We are live.
I might not even put the intro in so it doesn't get covered up. I'm just going to leave that. Yeah.
We are live.
Wow.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Hi. How was your weekend, by the way?
My weekend, yeah, it was okay. We spent a lot of time with family. Went to the local St. Patty's Day parade here, so that was fun.
In Tinley?
Yeah. Kids catching candy and
sweet.
So it was nice. It was nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. How about your weekend?
It was eventful.
Yeah.
It was eventful.
Yeah.
California is a beautiful, beautiful place around this time of the year. So.
Yeah. Well,
even though it was a little chilly, you know, it wasn't 50, so it wasn't hot, but training was phenomenal. I'm beat up to this day, so
Good.
I'm recovering. I didn't even train yesterday. I was kind of recovering from the whole thing, but it was a great time hanging out with the crew. For those who don't know, we had a little weekend retreat, and we went to California. We trained for 4 days, and then, you know, a small group, dozen of guys came back. And none of them showed up yesterday.
No, that's not true. Mike Liston was here.
Oh, Mike Liston.
And Tim came last night.
Tim came last. Yeah, I guess I'm wrong. Yeah, some of them did show up, but
yes.
It was a great trip. It was a great trip. We need to do it again. Shout out to Professor Alberto Crane, who hosted us at his academy. So what a great place it is, and you know. It was phenomenal. And I had an opportunity to record a podcast with Alberto, actually.
Again?
It was very...
He keeps having you back, huh?
It was very spontaneous, but we talked... Man, some of the stories that we talked... I'm not saying anything, but you guys are going to need to listen to it. It's ridiculous.
I'll check it out.
Some of the stories were old school way back. It's just, it was
Alberto's been
ridiculous.
around, right?
It's been interesting.
Cool.
It was fun. It was fun for sure. It was
Awesome.
fun for sure. Shall we get into our guest today?
Yeah, I think we should start
All
this
right.
one.
Kyle Watson in the house. How are you, sir? How are you doing today?
How's it going, guys? Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks for being here and thanks for chatting with us. But like when I think about your name, there is certain weight that I feel that's associated with it. Not only from a jiu-jitsu perspective, but also from an MMA perspective. You've been around the block for quite a while, and you've dipped into your toes into multiple different areas here. How in the world does this all started? What brought you into martial arts to begin with?
Well, I've told my story many times, but I like to tell it just because, not to hear myself talk, but just so other people who may have started somewhere kind of really, really low rung and want to try to achieve something that maybe I can at least have a little bit of inspiration. But I came from a really, really small town. And I always tell people small enough that, cow tipping was like our high school sport. But we had less than 1,000 people, not even a stoplight in my town, only yield signs and stop signs. But anyways, so I don't know. I was just always competitive and just like wanted to do martial arts. I was always watching, the classic Van Damme movies and Steven Seagal, and had those dreams of like, oh, I want to be like that, and just never had the outlet, and got to try it out in college. I was like, when I go to college, I'm gonna try out a bunch of different martial arts and see, because I used to go. I tell people this all the time, but I literally, I'm dating myself here, but I would go to Family Video; those still existed, and
I remember those. Yeah.
Yeah, they would sell used VHS tapes of the old UFCs. So I would buy them, and I would take them home and I would watch them, like Ultimate Japan, Ultimate Brazil, a bunch of the old school ones, and watch them and think. And never in my mind did I think, oh, I'm going to do that. But I was just like, man, this is really cool. And that kind of got the ball rolling. And then in college, I, dabbled around a couple different martial arts until I stumbled across jiu-jitsu, and I'm like, oh, this is the thing. And then, back in the day, it was like a lot of times you just wanted to test this stuff out. And I had trained for, I don't know, before I took my first fight, I think I was training for maybe like 2 years. And I was like, oh, I want to try this, see if it works, and I just started like literally just scouring, trying to find where do you fight? How do you fight? How do you get into these fights? And just stumbled across a show in Fort Wayne, Indiana called The Danger Zone. And it was run by Dan the Beast Severn. I sent him an email. He said, sure, come on out. And it was in a bar, everybody's smoking. And I fought a boxer from Canada, and I won, but I got punched a lot. Like I got punched a lot, and ended up winning by triangle choke. Thought I had asthma because I couldn't breathe. Thought I was going to die for a couple minutes. And then once I caught my breath and Dan Severn congratulated me, I'm like, I think I want to do this again. And then that was kind of the start, so it's just pretty wild.
Frame me here in from a time perspective, and not to put an age on you or anything, but what year is this? Because I think that's really important from a comprehension of the evolution of martial arts in general. What year is this first fight?
Sure. So my first fight, let me think about this for a second. So I started doing some sport clubs in the fall of '99, and then started like more formally training jiu-jitsu maybe maybe like 2 semesters in. And then I think my first fight was 2003, summer of 2003.
So
okay,
just a few years.
So a few
maybe
years.
2002, one of those two. Maybe 2002, one of those 2 years.
But I guess the point is this is the first decade of UFC, right? Like if UFC started in 93 or so, right? This is like the first initial 10 years.
Yes.
And it brings me to the point, interesting, I guess, thought here is you grow up in a very small town. You start some form of all this in 93, which is essentially 6 years after UFC starts. So between the small town and the UFC not being known yet, how in the world are you come across martial arts? Where's this thought sourcing? I guess what I'm saying is the exposure of martial arts and just MMA in general is not as prominent as it is today. How do you come across all this?
Sure. Well, so that's interesting. So like, unfortunately, like back to the blood sport and kickboxer movies, I just thought that idea was awesome. Like just being able to defend yourself and being able to, I don't know, just maybe a little bit of the bravado type, but I wasn't like that. I mean, I feel like I was a pretty humble kid, but I just wanted to be tough. I want to be good at something. And I was like, okay at soccer, okay at baseball, but I want to be good at something, that I thought was like cool. And when I tried out a few of these sport clubs in college, I was just kind of dabbling around and I understood MMA from the standpoint of just watching those VHS tapes, but I was like, I didn't know what is the best thing. So I dabbled around. I actually started with a sport club called Goshin Jitsu, and they mixed everything kind of. It was funny. We wore gis, but we threw strikes and we did throws and we did submissions. And I will say that the guy that ran the program, his nickname was Joker, and I would all stay after, and he would just, I was his guinea pig, and he would just beat the shit out of me, and then just test everything on me. But I loved it. I was a glutton for punishment. I was like, man, and he could tell I was really gravitating towards the submissions. And he's like, hey man, if you like this, I want to introduce you to this Brazilian jiu-jitsu coach. And then from there, I was like, man, I fell in love with jiu-jitsu. And then once I decided, hey, I need to probably be a little more well-rounded, I started cross training. I was driving to a wrestling room at Eastern, and I was driving over to Peoria to do my kickboxing. And I was driving a lot, man. And that was back in the day where you didn't have everything in one gym. So I was doing my jiu-jitsu in one place, my wrestling in one place, my Muay Thai in one place, and just trying to kind of put it all together and figuring it out on my own. And don't get me wrong, my coaches were awesome and helpful. And I had a couple other teammates that wanted to fight as well. So we all just kind of figured out a lot of stuff on our own, and probably wasted a lot of years with inefficiency, but that was the beginning.
But I think you bring up a very good point, so like I started somewhere around the same time as you, maybe a couple of years later, but back then, even a really good coach was not able to give you the expertise, and not to take away from the coach, but it was simply because of the general knowledge about the martial arts. The expertise was not as high as it is today. Wouldn't you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. And when I first started training jiu-jitsu with my then coach, he was only purple belt. But then, like, once I started to kind of understand jiu-jitsu and kind of, I shouldn't say understand what jiu-jitsu was, not be good at it, but just, and then kind of, going to do some tournaments. Cause I did several jiu-jitsu tournaments before I fought my first MMA fight, but going around in like a purple belt was like the most amazing thing ever. Let alone coming across a black belt. So back then it was, and I say that all the time, a lot of times you're kind of a product of that environment, at least in the martial arts standpoint. And you kind of do things the way you were taught. But it's just like, over time, you have to kind of evolve or you just kind of die with the old guard. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think that was one of the challenges that we all faced, from that generation, is the fact that evolution either had to take place on our own, or we have to create the diversity of reaching out and finding the materials, right? Like, I mean, I even remember like the DVDs didn't exist. Like I still have it on my shelf over there. What was the like Gracie in Action bootleg version? And that was like, there was like almost a Bible. Like it was like the holy grail of what was out there. But besides that, there were a couple books, and it was Gracie magazine, and that's all it was. Like really, there was no access to information.
For sure. Well, in these days, if people saw your Gracie in Action collection, I think it was something different with a couple of greased up dudes in Speedos on the front, like punching each other.
What was it like going over to Easton? What were those mats like for you? Because that program over there is pretty well known.
Oh no, well, yeah, Eastern. It was the college. Well, so that was where Matt Hughes wrestled. And it was crazy how we crossed paths down the road, right? But what worked out really well about it is that I crossed paths with several guys just along the way that, just between cross training and what have you. And a lot of the guys in the Eastern wrestling room, they all fought MMA. So it was really awesome because I'm getting like, I didn't wrestle in high school. I didn't wrestle in college. So it was like I was exposed early on and shown how terrible and non-existent my wrestling was by having a bunch of guys who were actually good at wrestling, but also fighting and guys. So I felt like early on my wrestling defense got way better than my offense because I was just constantly had these tough guys trying to take me down and, you know, punch me in the face. So, but that's a great way to, you know, kind of learn pretty quickly, you know what I mean? But that room was awesome. And it wasn't even when I was going over there, it wasn't so much that I was going over there and I'm like jumping into wrestling classes. It was just literally training with tough wrestlers and picking their brains. And I was very of that. I think one thing I took away from my old coach was he's a very big, like Bruce Lee person as far as approach and philosophy. And so early on, I really did kind of, you know, kind of follow that, you know, absorb what is useful, kind of discard what is not kind of idea. And so it was just kind of like, hey, you know, that works for my body type. I'll do that. Hey, this guy's really good and I respect him. He's good at this and he showed me this. I'll try that. You know, it's very like, and then if it didn't work, I kind of just, you know, left it off the table until I could understand the mechanics of it later on or whatever. But yeah, just being in the room around a bunch of tough, experienced guys goes a long way.
Would you agree that back then, even when you talk about the wrestling room, that one of the mentality or strategies of training was kind of in a way survival, in a sense of, you know, if you're not tough enough to hang in, you probably shouldn't be doing this. Versus comparing, versus comparing to today, it's by far more strategic, right?
Yes. Yes, I think there was like whether planned or not planned, there was definitely a weed out process to kind of see who kind of made the cut, so to speak. And nowadays, you know, if you want to run a successful gym and successful business model, you can't really do it like that. Or you can, but you probably won't have the numbers to support, you know what I mean? But yeah, I mean, there's definitely that old school like mentality of kind of like, okay, well, let's see what you're made of first to even see if you can kind of have what it takes to make it in the cage, you know?
Yeah, and I mean, I remember we had Mario Sperry here on the show, and he talked about probably decade prior to what you're talking about, and the emphasis on magnitude of that mentality was very present. It was like, listen, if you can't survive day one, might as well, why you here, you know? And it was creating this very tough grind in a sense of survival mode in individuals versus, you know, today again, if we did that at our academies, I don't know, it would be like 3 of us.
Well, it depends on what your definition of successful is, right? If you got guys going out ruining everybody and it's a small core group, that could be your definition of successful. But if you want 250 students, you have to have a different approach.
I suppose you're right, because there are some academies around the world which do specialize in very tough environments. And even, I mean, wrestling rooms today, they are still tough. Maybe not as tough, but they're still, you know, that toughness is very prominent, very, very present, you know, and the grind. You know, we just had, you know, a wrestler recently, you know, come into the academy and joining in, and he was like, man, I can, like, this is very different than my wrestling room. Like, this is, you guys are like relaxed. There's no... Yeah, well,
sure.
Yeah.
Well, and I think too, it also kind of ends. It's like what's your end goal, and like what's the goal of your and the philosophy of your gym. Now there's give and take there. I think that there's some gyms that like, hey, they want to create UFC champions and they need a tough room. They need, when you come in, they need a room of tough guys that day in, day out are going to grind and they're going to, like, the iron sharpens iron. So I think there's definitely places that need to be like that. But it just kind of depends on, I don't want to make UFC champions right now. And I want people to explore martial arts. I want to be able to help the casual hobbyist soccer mom all the way up to someone who wants to compete in the pans and world championships in jiu-jitsu and kind of everything in between. But I'm not looking at making, world-class fighters. So then my approach when people come in the door, I'm going to handle it different than say an academy that, already has several people in the highest rungs,
Yeah. And a very good point. I mean, the evolution of martial arts and jiu-jitsu in general has changed from this fighting sport to more accessible to general population, right? I mean, you were on TUF. of the beginning stages of TUF. I don't know what season they have now. Was it like 30 or something, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. So, I mean, but you were at the very beginning stages of this when the developing that show or the dynamic was just developing. That was very different than what your academy looks like today, right? I mean, there was no average doctor or lawyer on TUF, right? These guys didn't care much about, well, I suppose I should be asking you this, but the perception at least was that the caring about money was not the primary thing. It was more about being in there, being the fighter, being the best of the best. And correct me if I'm wrong here.
Oh, for sure. I think it was I think I was in at a time where it was a little of both. Like, I think there was, because I had some young guys on my season, and don't get me wrong, they were talented too, but I just mean, I think you could tell there were some guys there that they were there for the cameras. They wanted the limelight. When you look back and see some of the guys, notorious characters from previous seasons, I think they wanted to be like that, and they thought, okay, I'm going to be a superstar, and they were there for that. I was there to like challenge myself, further my career, see what I could do against some tough guys. And don't get me wrong, I mean, I enjoyed being on the camera. I enjoyed the traveling that came along with it. And the money's, I mean, not good, but it's not bad either. And so that was all nice. But I definitely think that within the cast, even my season, you could see the differences between the guys that were there for X reason versus another reason. And there were definitely people there that just wanted the notoriety, I think.
Well, it's a show, right? End of the day, it is an entertainment, and that entertainment pays for the show and pays you guys or whoever is on it, right? So I can see, the argument behind both of them. I want to be the best, and I want to use the vehicle to do that, but also, publicity, in this country at least generates revenue. It is what it is. So I think by that show getting bigger, some of that it was recognized, and some of the guys were trying to capitalize on it, and I suppose rightfully so, they should be doing that.
Well, in retrospect too, that was a part that they beat me on, and I failed. As I just told myself before I went, I told my wife, because she wasn't at the time, she was very supportive, but she wasn't like, oh, you're going to be gone for 6 weeks, I can't talk to you. She goes, that sounds terrible, and wasn't on board. But once I kind of explained to her like kind of what it could do for the family and what our family and what have you, she was kind of on board. But I went there. I just said, hey, I'm going to go there, put my head down, do what I need to do. I did enough to get on the show as far as being kind of having the persona and being a little crazy. But when I was on the show, I was really laid back and subdued, because I felt like anything else took away from the focus. Like, I'm here to win. I'm here to beat these guys. But that came back to bite me a little bit, I think, because I could tell, some of the other guys that were fighting for the camera time, and I didn't want to waste my energy on it. When it came time to like, hey, how much farther are you going to go in the UFC after the show? It really made a difference, like how popular you were and how much of a character you were, like Bruce Leroy on our season. Like, he's still fighting. I think he just fought like a couple of months ago. Okay. And this was 2010, and he's still fighting the UFC because Dana White loved him, because he loved his persona. I even remember a couple of the crew members even like kind of joking with me saying, oh man, you were really funny during the interviews to get on the show. Like, what happened to that guy? Because I was just very like, I don't care now. I don't need the attention. I'm here to beat these guys. But that came back to bite me. And then, I had a couple fights with the UFC, and then, my last loss when they cut me was right when they absorbed the WEC. So they had a whole bunch of lightweights coming in. So they were trying to trim the fat. And I really think part of the fact was I'm not a super exciting fighter. I feel like I'm fairly boring. I kind of take guys down and try to dry hump them to victory. And then I think my personality on the show was a little dry. So it did kind of come back in the end. But that being said, though, I felt like I was pretty true to myself. I was who I was. I wasn't like trying to be fake for the cameras. And, at the end of the day, I'm happy with how things turned out,
So let me put you on the spot here, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Do you think the entertainment factor in MMA, even in jiu-jitsu, we can take both ways, is more important than the skill itself?
Well, see, I've had this conversation before, and here's why I think it's so difficult, because it's like, obviously the UFC wants entertaining fighters, but you also have to win to be able to continue being entertaining. So there's this kind of like chicken before the egg thing where it's like, if you win enough that you give yourself enough cushion that now you can take risks and be exciting, then they'll probably keep you around for a while. But I think if you try to be exciting first and then you lose, you don't have the buffer of like, you're just another new name that the UFC hasn't built up yet. And then you lost a couple in a row trying to be exciting and now they cut you. So I think it's really difficult. You have to strike that balance of like, you still have to have some type of a winning streak to build your credibility. Mm-hmm. Otherwise you just get cut. But then, you know, so that's why it's that kind of double-edged sword. Let's say I go out and I'm just trying all spinning moves and jumping stuff and stomps and different things that get the crowd excited. That's all cool. But if you take those big risks doing all these spinning moves and all of a sudden you get knocked out or choked out, then it's like, well, were you exciting enough to override the fact that you lost or not? And I think that's a really kind of tough one to reconcile, if that makes sense.
Yeah, as I suppose the entertainment factor is not only being loud and in everybody's faces and drawing the attention, is also the performance, right? If
Yes.
your performance is high quality, that is viewed as entertainment as well. But I think, I don't know, I'm kind of split on this, but I feel like the entertainment sometimes is more important than the skill that one has. You still need to win, but the skill is like, it becomes a little bit more secondary simply because the entertainment is the money, is the revenue generating vehicle, if you will.
Yeah, maybe, but I think
you look at. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I was just going to say time will tell, right? I think in 10 years, people will be the guys that are the top will be remembered for different reasons. I think that somebody like GSP and somebody like McGregor will be remembered again still in 10 years, but for very, very different reasons.
Good point. Good point. I mean, you're talking about two very different personalities and very different entertainment, bubbles, if you will, right? I mean, like, McGregor's all in your face. Even like this weekend, he was there, no beard and all that, making his being him. Yeah. It is what it is. And then you look at like GSP, which we'll talk about that experience in a moment. But like you look at his social media, and it's like he's almost like a definition of a true martial artist.
Yeah. Well, right? It's if McGregor's by a pool with a bottle. GSP's by the pool working out, and I think it's just, I think there's room for both, obviously,
Yeah.
Well, also too, if you look back at McGregor's, so he kind of embodied a little bit of what I was talking about, because you think about it, like he already had a pretty good cushion. Like he was winning a lot while he was talking shit, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But now things are changing a little bit where it's like, man, he hasn't won in a really, really long time, but he keeps on talking the same degree of shit. And it's kind of like one of those things where it's like, okay, well, now it gets to a point where it's like, okay, people start to look through it because it's like, okay, man, you're good at running your mouth, but now you're not backing it up. Whereas I think the difference is GSP didn't really run his mouth, but he fought everybody that they brought to him.
Yeah.
And would just, he was kind of like more the kind of the purity side of it. Is like, hey, some people want to watch him get him beat because he's like a goody two shoes. Yeah. And other people want to watch him because he has like such awesome skill. Whereas McGregor was like, man, he's like, I'm going to get, love me or hate me, I'm going to get attention through my mouth. But for a long time, he was backing it up,
Yeah, no, I agree. It's such an interesting dynamic with all of this, and it's, I can only imagine that it's very difficult to navigate, and so let me ask you this then. What was the hardest part behind being on TUF? Like, what was the most challenging thing that every night you went to bed, you scratch your head and it's like, damn it. I mean, like, I can't get through this.
Yeah, man. Honestly, it was super hard. And I gotta, I admit this to everybody. Like when I first went on the show, I wasn't cocky in the sense that like, I thought I would just go in there and beat everybody, but I know I'm mentally tough. And I thought I'll go through this. 6 weeks is nothing. 6 weeks will pass by. No problem. I'll do what I got to do. And that's it. I kind of had that mentality, like whatever, but man, by like week 3, week 4, I was struggling. It was literally one of the hardest things I've ever done. Part of it was because my my wife and I, our relationship was still relatively new, in the sense that, like, we met in 2009. We were only about a year in our relationship, and we literally talked every day. And I had already traveled a lot of places. I've been to Brazil a bunch of times, in Japan, all these places. But the reason why I bring that up is that I talked to her every single day, whether I was whatever part of the globe I was in. I always made sure I called her and talked to her every single day. So you get on the show, and not only you're not able to talk to significant others or family, but you literally have nothing else to do. You can't read, you can't listen to music. There was literally nothing for you to do other than drink and interact with the people that want to beat you up. And so it got to be a real struggle. And then also too, don't get me wrong, like having the amazing coaches, Danaher, Sean Williams, GSP, and all the other people they brought in a bunch of Olympians and black belts and all these great people. And it's awesome. But at the end of the day, they don't know you. They're not your normal coach. So they're trying to do a general, hey, let's make everybody better that has different body types, different skill set in a very, very short amount of time. And also knowing that we're going to end up fighting each other, even the guys on the same team. So it was like, you have no support network whatsoever. You don't have your friends. You don't have your family. You don't have your normal coaches. You'd have much less control over your environment, because there were some guys there that were natural 45ers. So they're just eating every day. I was a big 55er. I was cutting, from, not in today's standards, a little different, but back then I was a pretty big lightweight. I was like 180, and I'm fighting. I fought 4 times in 6 weeks. So it was like a nonstop weight cutting. And so you know how stressful that is, just being cranky, weight cutting and stuff like that. So you're in this uncontrolled environment, no support network, constantly cutting weight, and then you're training with the guys you're going to fight. So like, if I can't imagine another, like a more stressful situation, because you almost kind of have to hold back a little bit, because like, you want to beat them up in practice to sharpen your blade, but at the same time, you don't really want to know how sharp your blade is, and so it was one of the hardest things I've ever done. And so people will ask me many times, hey, would you do it again? And looking back now, having many years passed and being able to, and just being a kind of a different person, different mindset, I would do it again. But if you asked me within a few months after getting off the show, I would have said, hell no, I would never do that again. You know what I mean? Just because it was super hard. And that's coming from someone, I really do feel like I'm mentally tough. It was super tough. But no pun intended.
How do you wake up every morning on that show and you push it harder? See, in my mind, there's nothing more difficult in life of getting up, doing everything that you can. You're pushing 100%, and the result is so minimal or almost invisible. Right. And that's kind of what you are talking about, right? Yeah. You grinding, you're pushing, yet you cannot show your best because they will see it and they will take advantage of it. But yet you have to perform. So it's almost like you grinding, yet you can't see the results. You can't be the winner all the time, but yet you have to survive. What is your mental state? Like, how do you wake up? What's the reason for you to do it again?
That's actually a fantastic question. But I will tell you, and even though it did get old as the weeks got on, and you started to kind of like get accustomed to everything. But I will say there was a lot of driving factors. Like one, I was like, man, I worked so hard for this. I fought on so many of these like small rinky-dink shows, worked my way up, taken so many emergency room visits, so many stitches, all this hard work, whatever. And then you get there, and then I'll tell you what, man, not to sound all like, weird about it, but like being in the UFC training center and knowing I'm waking up and like you're living in this mansion. Okay. And it's all these new smells and sounds. And there was some camaraderie. Obviously we were on a team until you get to the end. So there's some camaraderie and there's joking around going on. And so you get to go and you walk into the UFC training center in Las Vegas and you look up and you see all the seasons on the wall that were before you and you see all their faces and you're like, man, I'm part of this. I'm part of this. It's so exciting. And you just see the lights and the cage and then know that you're going into practice and you're learning from GSP and John Danaher every day. That was motivating. That was super motivating. And I was there like kind of talking about that kind of Bruce Lee philosophy before. I was there. I wanted to win. I was in the moment, but there were many times I caught myself just being like, man, this is amazing. I can't wait to take this back and teach my students. The way Danaher taught, there was just so many little things. And I kept a journal, and they made fun of me. And I was like, whatever. I kept a journal. I wrote in it every single day. And don't let me get I'm a roundabout talker, so don't let me get too far off track. But I called a few people that I had buddies that were on previous Ultimate Fighters. I said, hey, is there anything I need to know or any advice? And one of the guys said, take a journal, man, because he goes, you're going to forget a bunch of stuff that you're going to wish you remembered. And so I took a journal and I sat in there and I wrote part of it. I kind of almost like wrote it to my wife, but I wrote every single thing that happened every single day. And that thing was like really amazing. But I wrote down a lot of stuff that I wanted to take back and remember and teach my students. And I thought that was really cool. And then now, my son's not really old enough to understand it now. He's seen my baseball cards. He's seen that I was on a show, and he's seen that like this and that, but he literally does not care. He would rather look at Legos. He doesn't give a shit. But one day I think it will be cool to show him that journal and let him read through it and kind of see what I did and what I went through. But anyway, back to kind of the point. That stuff was motivating to me. That was really motivating to like get to learn from these amazing people that I would probably not get to maybe cross their paths, and definitely not on a daily basis. That was super motivating. And I was excited too. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, back then I was like, I was a little more full of piss and vinegar. I was like, I kind of want to fight these guys, It's like, I just want to see what I can do,
Yeah, no, for sure. I can completely see that. But first of all, Kyle, come on, Legos, I mean, what are you talking about? I mean,
I appreciate that. Well, it's funny. I competed this last Saturday. Actually, I still compete because I try to lead by example for my students and stuff. It was really funny because it was in St. Louis where my gym is. So the audience was packed. I had a ton of students, had a ton of friends there, and they announced me as jiu-jitsu royalty. And now I know, but here's the thing is I don't think that or act like that in my head, but I made sure to remind my wife when I went home. I was like,
of course.
Hey, did you hear what they said about me? like, shut up.
The question is, did you sleep on the couch that night?
No. She, trust me, at this point, she's used to my dorky sense of humor.
Yeah, no, for sure. Go ahead.
Well, do you go back?
Down, so.
Do you go back to that journal? Have you gone back to that journal?
I have only a couple of times. That's a good question. We've at my house, like we've moved some things around. My wife's a total book nerd and she literally has a huge library of books. And there's been times where we've moved stuff from bookcase to bookcase. And when I've grabbed that, like, I'm like, oh, and I'll sit down and I'll read a couple of pages, and it brings back a flood of memories. Sometime I'll sit down and read the whole thing through, but I probably picked it up maybe like 3 times and just read a couple of pages here and there.
I'll put you on the spot again. What's the best line or what's the best paragraph you have written in that journal? What's the best memory from that was documented in there that maybe many don't even know about?
2 things that like stand out for me was something Danaher said and something that Mike Tyson said when he was there visiting. Danaher said, and this is amazing because I was always intrigued, like when I was in college, one of my favorite college courses was like an introduction to social psychology. And that's not my field, but it was one of the classes I had to take. And I found it interesting because it just talked about human behavior and how people's minds work. And I found it pretty fascinating. Well, why is that important? Well, Danaher made a comment, and this was so true and it's so interesting to see this, is that when we first fought to get into the house, we had to win one fight to get in the house. But there's no teams yet. So you don't know, everybody's the same at that point. So when we run in the house to like all pick our rooms, we run in this mansion, we're running around. And then that first night after we all won to get in the house, we're all just celebrating together, and nobody's like red team and nobody's yellow team. Okay. And so we're just all hanging out and everybody's getting along just fine. And then the next day we pick teams, and immediately everything changes. Everybody's attitude changes, their posture changes, just everywhere. And Danaher brought it up, he goes, did you notice how, it was all us until there was a them? And it was something to that effect. I don't know if that, I'm probably butchering the line, but you notice how it was all us until there was a them. It was something like that. But it was basically, the idea that we're all like friends, and the moment you pick sides, the moment like there's an us versus them, everything changed. I thought that was really fascinating. And when he said that, and then it was just so noticeable. It was just like it was in the house. It was just super, super obvious. That was one thing. And then the other thing is when George brought Mike Tyson on, he gave us like he hung out for a while. He watched a few of the fights, and he was there a few different days, and he gave some pep talks. And one, it was amazing just to meet him and just hang out in the locker room with Mike Tyson. But it was just cool to listen to him talk about. And I think he might have said this since on other interviews. I don't know, but that was the first time I heard it. He was just talking about fear, and he was just using the analogy, just saying that everybody's scared of fighting. He's like, I was scared every single time I fought. And he goes like fear is analogous to fire in the sense that you need fire because you cook with it, you heat homes with it, and you do all these things. So when you use it and you can control it, it's an amazing thing that improves life. But when you let it go out of control, it burns down your house and burns down everything that you care about. And just that idea that like fear is normal and natural as long as you control it and not let it control you. And I just thought that was really powerful in that moment to sit there and listen to Mike Tyson say it, that way. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, those are deep thoughts, right? That we often don't sink in until the right person says it at the right time. And
for sure.
That's the big part of, being the leader, being the motivator. And you find yourself in this unique position of having, GSP and John Danaher and then, many others, including Mike Tyson there, that you can really learn from and relate to. Do you comprehend the magnitude of this? And I ask this almost every episode. Like it became like a thing for me now, but I'm so fascinated by you being in this unique opportunity of one meeting. Let's just focus on GSP for a second. You're meeting GSP. You train with him. You can pick his brain almost to the unlimited point where he's there for you and, you guys interact. Many people would pay millions to be in your shoes. Do you understand the weight, magnitude, and what's surrounding you at that point of time to have a true appreciation? Or does that kick in a little bit later when you leave the show?
No, I think kind of back to what I was saying about that kind of like what was motivating me in getting up. Like I did feel like I did have a good handle about it. Danaher at that point hadn't become, I knew him. All the people in the jiu-jitsu community knew who Danaher was, but a lot of people outside of it did not. But I knew who he was. So I was trying to relay to the other guys on the team, like, guys, you don't know what we're getting here. This is amazing. I can't, I can't believe this. So, was there more levels of appreciation and understanding that came later? Yes. But I definitely felt like I had a good sense of the magnitude then. And that did motivate me to wake up. And I've been lucky like that in a lot of senses. Just having the experience of teaching jiu-jitsu at Matt Hughes' gym, like daily I'm training with Lawler, I'm training with Matt Hughes. Just a few days ago, I was going through some old pictures and I found it's funny because I have all these old pictures of my jiu-jitsu classes. And wouldn't you know, a white belt sitting in my front row of one of my pictures was Neil Magny. So, I had just having trained with four of the top welterweights, of all time and seeing that they're drastically different. I mean, there were some similarities, but just getting the experience of training with all these like high level guys but anyway, back to your kind of question is that, did I have a full sense of the whole magnitude? No, but I definitely had it enough to be really appreciative and feeling like, man, this is like a once in a lifetime thing,
So you pull up to the house, you made the show, right? You pull up. What was first, the training center or the house?
It was the training center because we fought there first.
Okay.
And then once we fought, then we got to move.
You made the cut and you're going out. Okay. Walk me through that day. Walk me through the first 10 minutes. You approaching the building
of the house or the fight.
The first thing that you made it. So you arrived to Vegas, right? This is in Vegas at that point?
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You arrive to Vegas, blah, blah, blah. You go into the training center. This is your first interaction with TUF, right?
Yeah.
You approaching the building, you getting through that door, and then you seeing all these posters of previous shows, all these champions.
Mm-hmm.
You surrounded essentially by the best of the best. You walking down the hall. Walk me through your mental state, thoughts that are going through your mind. What's going on inside?
I mean, a lot of it's, I'll be honest with you, is a blur just because it's like from so long ago and I've been hit in the head a lot. But also, but I do remember a lot of portions of the show distinctly. And I definitely think that it was a mix of nerves and excitement. So the excitement of being there, because even though, like, don't get me wrong, you're not on the show yet and you have to win to get in, but it's still that feeling of like, I've made it. Not that you like, you're a UFC champion, but you've made it. You know, so many people that fight MMA, their dream is to make it to UFC and to walk into the UFC training center and see it. It's like there was that sense of like, oh my gosh, I'm here. I've worked so hard for this. It's hard to even believe that I'm actually here. You know, so but then there was also the nervousness because, you know, you're nervous to fight regardless. But I had a pretty good handle on my nerves most of the time when I was fighting, especially on the show. But I think there was more nerves because you didn't know who you're going to fight and they're randomly selecting. And so you had no idea. So it starts off with 28 guys. And some of them we knew because they had fought before. So like Jonathan Brookins and Nam Fan, you know, they already had names. And there was a couple other guys that were pretty tough that I kind of heard like grumblings of like, oh, that guy's really good at this or that guy's really good at that. And so there's no way to really prepare because once you're there, you don't have like the ability to go like look up your guy and know anything about him. So I actually ended up fighting Joe Duffy, who ended up, making it to UFC later on his own. And, you know, he headlined a fight night against Poirier and he had some pretty notable wins. But I at the time, I didn't know who the guy was. I'm like, man, I'm just fighting this tall guy that's like from Wales or Scotland or something. I'm like, he's got to be a boxer. So I just kind of had that in my head. And then what do you know? He comes out and pulls guard on me. I'm like, man, it was crazy. But back to the emotions. It was just that. It was excitement of like kind of feeling like you almost made it. You're like kind of there. But the nervousness of like, okay, this rug can still be snatched right out from under me. And I felt so bad, like seeing some of those other guys, because a couple of the guys that lost, I knew them. And just to be that close in one fight, maybe one decision within that fight made all the difference, whether you actually made it in the UFC or not. You know what I mean? And so that was heartbreaking for some people. And so it was a mix of emotion. It was definitely a roller coaster.
So decade later, you know, obviously you have your own academy, you have tons of your own students, and you turned this experience of being in the center of attention, you know, from TUF and UFC and the fights that you've done to now becoming a leader. And, you know, people look up to you and some consider you royalty of jiu-jitsu, you know. And how do you use the experiences that you've had in your past to share that with your students, even with your kids maybe, to motivate them to do something amazing in their life, and not necessarily martial arts, but just to achieve the goals, get to the milestones, and you know, deal with some of those pressures of life that we see every single day?
Oh, for sure. That's been one of my motivations for like really, you know, just with my family is like, I've been able to fill up a couple of passports and like, and so many of those experiences that I got, I wish I could have shared that with my family now. So now my goal is, you know, I'm a little more established. I'm like, okay, hey, let's travel. I want you guys to see the world too. I want you to see all this stuff. But I think back to your question is that, you know, every kind of next generation, like, is standing on the shoulders of the previous group. And I think it's like my obligation to, you know, I always talk about like shortening the learning curve. And this isn't necessarily always just jiu-jitsu or MMA, but I think it's like there were so many years in my career, like I told you about before, with watching the VHS tapes and doing this, whatever, where a lot of what we're doing, we're just kind of figuring it out and we're so inefficient. So I think it's really like my responsibility to shave off that time and be like, listen, you don't have to go through all that. Like, not that I have it all figured out, but there's so many great people you have access to that have a lot of information. And so what I've, kind of gathered over time by training with all these really high level guys and stuff like that is from each of them, it was really important for me to not just pick up a technique here or there, but also like methods and processes and see like, okay, success leaves footprints. So it's like, okay, not that I have to mimic everything somebody else does, but just say like, okay, he said this is what he did to make himself better at X. So, instead of reinventing the wheel, we can recreate that. And so I feel like, I want, my students are going to be standing on my shoulders. So I want them to be able to shorten that learning curve, gain more wisdom and knowledge and technique and processes quicker than I did to have to figure it out. Also I want to inspire them too. I think that's an important thing as being a leader and a role model is to do what you say you're going to do, be dependable, be trustworthy, be honest, and not to act like all self-righteous, but I just do think that I have so many people in my life that do look up to me and so many people that are involved in my life. Sometimes I'm in awe. I'll go into a class and there's, 50 students and I'm just like, and I'll just think to myself in my head, I'm like, man, you guys could be anywhere right now and you're choosing to hang out with this bum right here. You know what I mean? So it's just like, it's exciting to me. So I feel like that makes it my responsibility. You're choosing to have this time of your life with me. And some people, you know how gym junkies are, they'll train 4, 5, 6 days a week. So there's all that time they're away from their family, maybe away from their job, maybe for better or worse, I don't know. But, but they're choosing all that time to be around me. So I feel like it's important that I make that time worthwhile, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? That I make them better, that they walk out of the gym feeling that they've improved, whatever way that is, whether it's, fitness, whether it's stress relief, they didn't have to think about the stresses of the day, self-defense, whatever it is, competitive nature. So I just think it's really important for me to take what I've learned and pass that on. And I can already see in a lot of my students who kind of show those attributes that they want to teach as well, that I'll be able to kind of hand off the torch and they'll take it from there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that has to be very satisfying. And I have to say, like, I oftentimes I step in on the mat and room full of people, and they're all there and they are all there, not necessarily to train jiu-jitsu, but they're really there to train jiu-jitsu with you. And that is the important factor. And I think, unfortunately, I feel that a lot of instructors forget that part or take it for granted in a way.
Yes.
And I think, oftentimes that's one of the reasons why, people don't have the good experience. So hearing that there are instructors out there like yourself who really appreciate the fact of having students around them and really taking that time and paying it back to them and that full attention, handshake, knowing their names. I mean, that's critical. Wouldn't you say so?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Someone told me a long time ago, I feel bad because I always try to give credit where it's due when someone tells me something important. But early on, someone said, just treat people like, they have a problem and you're there to solve it and take care of them and solve that problem. And the money will come. But other people a lot of times have it backwards. They're just like, I want the money first and then we'll figure it out after that. And it's easy to say that, now that I've built something bigger. I remember the stresses of running a small gym and only having a few members and 20 members this way or that way can break you, I know that's stressful, but whoever told me that, I did take that to heart. And I really thought, hey, when people come in, I really want to make sure that they have a good experience and that they fall in love with martial arts like I did. I want them to fall in love with it like I did. And I think that goes a long way. But there's a lot of people that I think, like, I've referenced this before in other conversations where there's a good book called The E-Myth and just talks about why like so many businesses fail. It's because people are good at a skill and they think that means that they can run a business based on that skill. They'll just say, hey, I'm good at carpentry, I can just start a carpentry business. And that's not true. There's so much more that goes into it that other than the skill. And I think that's the way it is with a lot of like martial arts gyms, unfortunately, and why the turnover is so high. It's not even that they have bad intentions. They just think, hey, I'm good at jiu-jitsu, I can just open a gym, or I'm good at Muay Thai, I can just open a gym. But there's a lot of other things that have to come into that mix to actually make it successful.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. It's interesting how dynamic like that has a very fine balance, if you will, of, you know, doing what's right at the same time, investing ahead of time so it pays off later, and, you know, going back and forth in these things.
Well, you have to have the business sense, and then you also, you have to build a culture. I think, like you said, let the money come later. And I think the way that happens is by building your culture. And so How did you go about, opening your gym? And then bringing that culture out to the other people so that they want to be there. They want to share that time with you.
Yeah, I was fortunate, man. I had such a weird, like, twist of events. That's why it's just, for me, man, I'm like a meant to be type of believer, type of guy. It's just like too many weird things happened that couldn't possibly be explained through coincidence. And, but a couple of things that really helped me a lot is that out of college, I ran a couple of businesses. I had a couple of jobs that were managerial jobs where I was responsible for many people. Most notably, I worked for a company called Kaplan. They do test preparation, and I was their operations manager. And so I ended up overseeing about 50 teachers. And so it was the parallels to the business model were like incredible in the sense that I was selling instructional programs while managing people, and then it just translated so well. So I already had a lot of business acumen, I guess you'd say, kind of coming into it. And then also, then my college degree was in education. So I felt like I had a good understanding of, what makes people learn and how they learn. And then mix that with all the while I was training and fighting. So I felt like I had the background of the actual martial arts information. And then, I brought that all to the table, and then just tried not to be a douchebag.
Well, a lot of people underestimate that part, right?
Being a douchebag?
That too. Honestly, that too. But like knowing martial arts or knowing jiu-jitsu, that's one. But knowing how to run martial arts academy, that's completely separate skill that many don't know, and they feel that transition is going to be very easy. Just because you are a black belt or just because you know jiu-jitsu does not mean that you're going to have a successful academies. And I think that's becoming more and more visible today as jiu-jitsu continues growing, and as jiu-jitsu academies, or even just martial arts in general, facilities become a professional service that's being provided to clients. And that I feel like often that's just underestimated.
Yeah, I agree.
There's also that other component, though, and I think that, people say, you hear a lot nowadays about, oh, nobody wants to work anymore. And I think that this ties into it a little bit, where there's community, there's culture, which I think is a much more bigger part of people's lives than it used to be. You used to go and you punch in, punch out, but now you go, you punch in, or you don't even punch in, but work is always with you. Your laptop's always with you. Your phone's always with you. And if you don't have those other, attractive attributes about your job or your extracurriculars, I don't know. I think that people get turned off, it
becomes difficult.
I agree completely. Yeah, I agree completely. And it was like, there was a time in my life, like, I'm still, kind of attached to my phone too, just from the standpoint is I still interact with everybody. I answer a lot of the phone calls. I'm at the gym a lot, but it's way better now that I have more systems in place, and I realize how important family is. But for a long time, my wife knew it was very scary when I went out on my own and opened up my own place. But she knew I had the drive, and I'm glad she had the faith in me. I just told her, hey, if I have to be at a gas station handing out pamphlets, I'll do it, I'll do whatever it takes, and I used to always have that mentality. And for a long time, especially in the beginning stages, I I was just like, even when I was home, I was always like somewhat involved, somewhat tethered to the gym. I was always taking phone calls. I was always answering emails. I was always thinking about, okay, what do I do next to enhance the user experience? And that is what it takes. And some people either might fail because they don't know that's what it takes, and then others just aren't willing. But it is harder than it seems, but it's all worthwhile. It's all worthwhile, you know. So,
and I think that's the important part, right? For anybody who is looking or thinking about, you know, running or being involved in some capacity in Jiu-Jitsu Academy, especially with the growing interest around it, it is a lot of freaking work. It is insane. But end of the day, you know, a decade later or whatever, many years later, when you sit back and look back and you walk into that room full of 50, 60, 70 people, and they're all there for you. That's the moment. At least for me personally, that's when it hits me. It's like, damn it, this is why. This is why it's all worth it, because they are here to be with you. We are here to learn from you, and I'm confident that you're sharing, you know, similar feelings when you walk in with the success that you have.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, and it's funny. The other day, I've hung up a lot of posters in the gym, like from, you know, UFCs and different things, and like just different pictures and memorabilia. The other day I was looking through some stuff that I hadn't hung up that was just sitting in a pile. And I actually kept a couple of things from my first gym, and I framed them because I'm just like, you know what, I want to always remember how hard it was and what the first academy was like. Yeah. So I kept a couple of things, I framed them. I haven't put them up yet, but I will, just because I always want to be able to look at that and be like, hey man, just when you think that you got it good, remember what it took, you know? Yeah.
Those memories keep us in check. Keep us. Why are you laughing? This is serious.
Nothing, I'm not laughing. I'm smiling. There's a difference. But so, like, you know, Chewy's got his red mat, right? Yeah. We've talked about that. What did you frame? Just pick one.
Yeah. What was that?
Yeah. So one thing I framed, it's kind of a joke. It's a joke. So when I first opened up in the upstairs of a 24-hour fitness gym. It was called the Lab Gym, and it still exists. And the two brothers that owned it were great guys, and they leased the space upstairs. And it was a nice relationship, symbiotic in the sense that, like, you know, there's a 24-hour fitness gym down below. You can come upstairs and do jiu-jitsu and Muay Thai or whatever. And they ran a big charity event called the Big Flip Off. And it was basically like they did like contests, like where they're doing tire flips and push-ups and stuff. And they had kind of like a circus, like an old-timey like guy with a mustache holding a dumbbell up, you know, but it's called the Big Flip Off. So I framed that poster. And then a second one I framed, I ran a charity event. I'm really big at giving back, and every year, a couple times a year, I'll do something. I'll pick a charity and we'll do something. Well, one year, one of the coolest things we did is I called it the Arm Barbecue. Like arm barbecue.
I like that.
And don't steal that. I'd never heard it before, and I thought, oh, I actually made something. It's cool. But what we did is we brought somebody brought up a huge grill that you pull behind like a truck that'll make like 100 hamburgers at once. We put it in the back of the gym, out in the parking lot. I contacted a local like animal shelter it's actually a group that works with like 5 different shelters called, they have like it's called Gateway Pet Guardians, but they do all these things. But anyways, I'm a real big fan of if I do something charitable, I usually like to involve either kids or pets, you know, and this one was for animal shelters. And so what I did is they brought adoptable puppies. And so what I did is I had a giant open mat. And I said, come, it's free barbecue, and you get to hold adoptable puppies, and you get to roll jujitsu. All I asked for is like a $20 donation. So, and then all the money went to Gateway Pet Guardians. So, I mean, how can you turn down barbecue, jiu-jitsu, and puppies?
No kidding. I mean?
So anyway, so it was awesome. And I had a guy who does graphic design for a couple of companies in St. Louis. And he's like, I asked him, I was like, hey man, would you design a poster for me? And he did. It's awesome. It's literally a chef, like with a chef hat and a black belt, and he's arm barring a cow. And it says, you know, Arm Barbecue, whatever year it was. So I have that one framed too. I know it's a long way to explain a poster, but it was pretty cool.
No, I actually want to see it. But what a phenomenal story. I mean, it's all these experiences really give us, memories and areas kind of point of reflection, as we continue building our lives in whichever direction it goes. And I think that's the beautiful part. That's part of these things that we share with the next generation, with the hope that they can anchor their life on top of it and kind of continue going and continue building, whether it's jiu-jitsu on and off the mat. It really doesn't matter, at least in my mind. That's my thoughts. Kyle, we've been at this for a while. An hour. Jesus, I always say this, but it flies. It's so fast.
When they're good ones.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes you're like, uh-oh.
But before we end this, we didn't tell you. At the end of each episode, what we do is we have a question for you. But the question is from our previous guest. And he had no clue who will be answering that question. So think of it as this question completely in blind. And Gary's going to take a lead on this. And this is actually going to be good.
This is from Nick the Tooth.
Nick
Grillo,
the Tooth.
who I've become a huge fan of. I listen to his sci-fi podcast all the time. I got sucked in. But Nick's question is, how has jiu-jitsu helped you? And it's a simple one. How has jiu-jitsu helped you off the mats?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, tremendously. It just, I think, on the mats with jiu-jitsu, we're learning how to constantly problem solve more efficiently, all while under pressure. And those can be different things, but also kind of combined. But I think off the mat, I think it's helped me just when something kind of bad or potentially bad happens, or you're in a stressful scenario, I think it allows you to slow things down, not get stressed, understand hey, there's a way out of everything. There's a way to figure out how to beat everything. There's a counter for everything. So I think it's a good way to stay level-headed when you're dealing with stressful situations and problem solving. But also, I think it helps you a ton with just you cross so many paths with different personalities on the mat, and I think it really helps you to kind of deal with people better off the mat too. Just understanding hey, this is how I deal with this type of mat personality and this type of mat personality. And I think it helps you outside of the gym in that way to kind of not put people in a box, but just, you kind of understand how people operate and how to deal with them a little bit better. But back to the previous point, I think it's just really being able to kind of face adversity head on and deal with it in a more calm and meaningful way.
Let me follow up asking on this. You talk about there was a way to get out of everything. So how come a lot of times we just try to plow through things? There's no logic behind this. We're not thinking. We are not analyzing position. We're not making smart decisions. We are not trying to put intelligence behind our actions yet. We have this very impulsive reaction to whatever is surrounding us, on or off the mat. It doesn't matter, but it's a human reaction. It's so easy to dip into this anxiety of let me the hell out of here, and we don't think.
Yeah. Well, because I think it's the same is the wisdom that comes with experience. So kind of when we were talking about how, we try to become more efficient over time, and we try to help our students be more efficient than we were. It's kind of when you look back and you see people taught an armbar in class, and then they can never pull it off when it's live. It's because, they don't really have the experience and the wisdom to understand, all the details, the timing of when you would use it and the exact precision of the placement and what have you. So I think it's a lot of times with problems too. People just try to cut corners or try, like you said, just kind of blast through things inefficiently because they don't have the wisdom or experience of having dealt with something like that before. And that's where I feel like it'll be really helpful for my son, as I teach him, and I'm teaching him daily. It's not like this starts at a certain age. I mean, he's 7, but a lot of things that I've already experienced, whether for the positive or the negative, will hopefully be positive for him, because I can say, hey, this is the way you should handle this. I've dealt with this before, and this is a better way. You know what I mean? So I just think that, with experience comes wisdom. And I think that people become more efficient problem solvers once they've faced the problem multiple times.
Yeah, it's kind of this phrase. I love this phrase, and it kind of came to my mind as we were talking. Is like, I want you to make your own mistakes, but I don't want you to make mine. You know,
Yeah.
go through your own path, but take, what I've learned in life, and let's use it to the best that we possibly can. Kyle, before we wrap this up, where can people find you? If anybody wants to connect with you, talk to you, see maybe some of the cool stuff that you're hanging at the academy, where you at, where you're accessible, website, social media. I mean, let it go.
Yeah. So my academy is in St. Louis, Missouri. If people are ever passing through, we're very visitor friendly. So if people want to stop in and, train, no problem. But we're in St. Louis, smack dab right in the middle of the city. You can see the arch, the St. Louis arch from the back of my gym. On Instagram, it's just Watson Martial Arts, and my website is watsonbjj.com. I have quite a bit of information there. If it's okay, I'd give a shout out to my sponsor, Show Your Roll. They always have my back, and so I always appreciate them. But yeah, other than that, I'm always happy to interact with people. I get questions all the time about random things, and I'm always down to help. And I get a lot of school owners that contact me as well, and it's just kind of like what we just said. If I can kind of help you, not make some of the same mistakes.
Phenomenal. Well, we appreciate you being here. Thank you for hanging out the last hour or so and truly sharing your experiences, your knowledge, your wisdom, and some of the cool stuff that you've done. And so thank you for that. Gary?
Yeah, thanks for everything. I just want to say, we do a takeaway after this. Sometimes we're struggling for topics. I got a couple good ones, so thank you for that. And it's basically all giving back or being helpful. So I just want to say thanks for taking that attitude and carrying that forward. So thank you.
Kyle?
Well, I appreciate you guys' time. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Absolutely. Let's wrap this up for today.
All right.
And we'll see you around.
All right. Thanks, man. Peace.
Thank you for listening to RŌL Radio. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to leave us a review and help us make the show even more amazing. For future episodes, check out our website and follow us on all major podcast platforms. Take care.